Well, shalom or Shabbat shalom to most of the country. It is Friday night, April the 3rd, 2015. Passover Day, the 14th of Aviv, is just about to end here on the West Coast as twilight settles across the land as I make this podcast. And we are going into the 15th day of Aviv, or otherwise known as the first day of Unleavened Bread. Because once it is totally dark and the weekly Shabbat has begun, the first of the 7 days of unleavened bread begins. I took a photo of one plate of our Passover Seder feast tonight. I just wanted to show off the nice Passover Seder plates that we had prepared for our feast tonight, which we just now finished. If you look at the plate that I have in the picture here, you'll see the bowl on the right is actually a bowl filled with caroset. I don't normally make caroset because it's not one of the dishes required in Exodus 12, but I had some help this Feast of Passover, so we have some nice caroset, which is actually really simple to make. It just requires some apples and walnuts and a little bit of cinnamon and brown sugar and some kosher wine, and you just sort of mix it all together, and it's really, really good. You can find recipes on the internet. But the caroset represents the sweetness of being liberated from the bondage of the Egyptians, or the sweetness of Yahshua's blood liberating us from sin. Of course, we have the glass of grape juice or wine there. We have the menorah as a nice background. And then you see on the actual plate itself, we have the elements of the Exodus 12 Passover meal. We have the unleavened bread, which, of course, unleavened bread is always filled with symbolism because it is both striped and pierced, just as Yahshua was striped and pierced when he was beaten and nailed to the tree. That lump of white, yellowish stuff is the horseradish. That symbolizes the bitterness of the bondage that the children of Israel were in under the slavery to the Egyptians. Also symbolizes the bitterness of sin in our lives before Yahshua sets us free. The unleavened bread, of course, represents Yahshua's body. He is without sin, just as this bread is without leaven. And of course, he was also pierced and striped on the Passover day that we're celebrating today. The green is parsley, which is another bitter herb, because it does say you're supposed to eat this with eat the lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, plural. So the two bitter herbs I have here are horseradish and parsley, which tend to be the traditional bitter herbs that are eaten at most Passover meals. Doesn't have to be necessarily those two bitter herbs, but those are the traditional ones that we eat. The parsley, of course, and the horseradish, they're both bitter when you eat them. The horseradish especially, particularly if you get the pure horseradish, which is what I got, if you take enough of it, it will make your eyes start watering and it'll clear out your sinuses. It really tastes very, very bitter. One thing, though, that you might want to try, which is really neat, is if you take maybe 2 slices of broken matzah, unleavened bread, and you put some horseradish in between, you eat it. Of course, it'll be very bitter, and your eyes may start watering. But then take 2 more slices of unleavened bread and put some caroset in between it, and then eat it, and you'll be amazed about how the combination of the caroset completely takes away the bitterness of the horseradish and takes away those tears. So it's a really cool little symbolism there built into this Passover meal. And then, of course, you see the cooked lamb there. Now, some Passovers don't have the lamb. They think that because Yahshua was the ultimate lamb that went to the cross, that we shouldn't eat lamb. But I think we should, because that's what Exodus 12 says to do. We eat the lamb. The lamb, of course, does represent Yahshua as the perfect innocent sacrifice. The wine, of course, represents his blood. This is the ultimate communion, if you will, the ultimate Passover that we are commanded to do. It says, as I was reading through Exodus 12 today during the Seder that we did, I was just struck at how many times it said over and over again, this will be an ordinance forever, throughout all generations. We're commanded to do this even today. Now, of course, we know that Yahshua fulfilled this feast. He literally died on the Passover. He was literally on the cross as they were slaughtering the lambs, and he died as the lambs were being slaughtered and killed and prepared to be eaten. So we know he fulfilled this, but we do this as a memorial, because remember what Yahshua said at the Last Supper. He said, do this in memory of me. Do this in remembrance of me. So we're doing this in remembrance of Yahshua. And it's just amazing how every element on this plate symbolizes something about the atonement, the sacrifice, the bitterness of sin, or the release from bondage from sin. The other thing I noticed, even without the carousel, if you just look at the elements on the plate, which are drawn directly from Exodus 12, I noticed that when I would eat some horseradish and it was bitter and my eyes started watering, if I started eating a little lamb after that, the lamb itself, because of the acidity of the meat, would instantly take away the bitterness of the horseradish as well. So that's really interesting. So all the elements are here for the Passover Seder. I just wanted to briefly show off one plate from our Passover feast and describe the different elements of that plate and how it all points toward Yahshua. And that's the neat thing about these feasts. When you come out of the pagan feasts that Christians are idolizing, like Christmas and Easter, and you actually do the feasts that are in scriptures, like Passover, like Sukkot, it's amazing how every element of this feast just points directly toward Yahshua. So I hope you're all either enjoying or are about to enjoy or have enjoyed your Passover Seder. It's funny, I always eat fast. I probably eat faster than I should. But this meal, we're commanded, it says in Exodus 12, we're commanded to eat this in haste. So I was able to eat fast because, and it was actually a command from Yah. So that was kind of neat. The lamb was so good, so it was easy to eat it in haste. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have staves in our hand, and I was holding a staff, and our feet shod as if we're prepared to go on a journey. When our children ask why are we eating with a staff in our hand and our feet shod as if we're about to go on a journey, we explain to our children because this symbolizes when the children of Israel are about to leave their bondage of several hundred years in Egypt, and they're about to leave. And why do we have the unleavened bread? Well, because they couldn't leaven their bread because they were kicked out of Egypt after the firstborn was slain by Yahweh, and so they left. And all of these things symbolize that first Passover as well as the Passover 2,000 years ago that Yahshua fulfilled. So happy Passover, everyone. Happy Passover 2015. I hope that your Passover plate looks as beautiful as this. And if you didn't have Passover, hopefully this will inspire you to start doing the Passover. You can still get in on Passover. You can have unleavened bread. Or remember, if you missed Passover this year, the Torah allows you to do Passover next month. You can do Passover in the second month. It allows you to if you miss this Passover. So anyway, Shabbat Shalom to everyone as the first day of unleavened bread. The high Sabbath is beginning and the regular weekly Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom to everyone out there as we're beginning the 7 days of unleavened bread. Shalom. Shalom. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one other thing I just remembered I wanted to mention. I was looking at the calendar, and I mentioned in a video last night that Passover happens on a different day every year. But this year, what struck me was that the 7 days of unleavened bread, of course, start tonight, Friday night, and they stretch all the way through next Friday night. The seventh day begins on April 9th, Thursday night, and ends on Friday night as the weekly Shabbat begins. And what struck me is I realized that this year, rather than having 7 days of unleavened bread, we're actually going to have 8 days of unleavened bread, because by the time Friday night hits and darkness is over the land, and it's no longer the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which means we can go and buy yeast, or we can bring yeast into our house, we can start making bread, we won't be able to because it'll be the weekly Shabbat. And so we're not able to buy and sell or go purchase things or even bake and cook things like that. So Yah has sort of forced us to have not just 7 days of unleavened bread, but literally 8 days of unleavened bread, because the weekly Sabbath happens to fall right up against the 7th day of unleavened bread. And I was pondering that, and I think that has some prophetic significance. I think it's showing us that Yah is saying, look, we're about to enter into a season, into a time where you better be pure. You better have that purity of the unleavened bread, that without the leaven, without sin in your life. And I'm even going to tack an extra day on, where you're forced to continue to have unleavened bread and not able to have any yeast because it's a Sabbath day, and you can't go out and buy any yeast. You can't bring any yeast to your home because it's Sabbath. So it's as if he's highlighting it by extending it a day and saying, look, you better be pure, because the days are going to get dark here soon and things are bad. Also remember, tonight, actually it's going to be technically at least Pacific time tomorrow morning, early in the morning, I think it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll have to check on the internet, you will be able to see the blood moon, which is really fascinating because tonight, of course, is Passover, and this is the night in which we put the blood on our doorways, and the angel of death would have gone through and killed the firstborn of everyone that was not marked with blood. And we also have a blood moon to mark this night on the night of blood. That's supposed to be on our doorpost. So I think that's really amazing. It's very eerily prophetic. So, happy Passover to everyone, 2015. Shalom, shalom.